Hello again guys, and welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video here at the House of Devlin. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope this video is thought-provoking. I hope it starts to expand your minds. I hope it leads to debate and questions within the comment section, and I hope it joins us closer together in our understanding about the universe and paganism as a whole, because this is a pagan video. It's a video all about how pagans view the world and my individual interpretation of paganism, and about the specific point of why oneness, which is formed at the beginning of every recreational cycle, or at the end of every recreational cycle, whichever way you like to see it. What does oneness fragment into an infinite number of possibilities and probabilities to be fulfilled once again? Why does it do this? Now, oneness is achieved when throughout the lifespan of the universe events occur. Okay, probabilities, possibilities become fulfilled. They then are known as fates. Okay, and these fates become essentially when something is fulfilled completely, and there is integration of that event alongside a knowledge of what's happened and an understanding of why it's happened, together forming wisdom. And there's a wisdom attached to that event becomes integrated into the source that was originally at the beginning of the universe, which is oneness. And you can imagine the universe is going to live a very, very long time. And as I say, the universe is not only in the material realm, but also really I should call it reality. In our reality, as I say, it includes the 8 spiritual realms and our 1 material realm, the realm that we live in, Midgard itself, or the universe as we call it today. But when we consider the lifetime of the universe, or realities as a whole, they will come to an end, and at that end point, all the events that have ever occurred in that universe, no matter how small, whether it's an atom moving in this direction or whether it's a star exploding, doesn't matter how small, how large it may be, or how important within the great scheme of things it may be, doesn't matter. It all adds to the level of oneness, to the experience that the universe has had of itself, and the universe learns from itself in the same way that we learn from ourselves. I say it's the same way, it's the same mechanisms, but there's perhaps a slight more disconnect within the universe. The reason I say this is because obviously when we describe how the universe learns from itself, it learns from the completion of fates, it learns from the completion of possibilities, and we discuss higher learning centers and how that becomes integrated and creates a higher level of learning and a progression to oneness. Obviously we're discussing it from a human scale, because this is what we know, this is what we experience. We can't even get into the mind of another animal and see how they see the world, not alone getting into the mind of the universe, so to speak, if it indeed existed. But the way that I propose is that the universe really is just like a sort of an organic computer, so to speak. Not an AI, just a computer that takes in data. That's all. It collects data. And it has a actual desire. It does have a desire. That's why I call it organic, because anything that is organic wants to grow, wants to live, wants to develop. If you go to the smallest of organisms, i.e. bacteria and viruses, or you go to our sort of scale of organisms that we're aware of, where the self-awareness is fully developed and everything like this, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how complex you are, or how simple you are, you have necessities and drives that you must fulfill. The basic ones are, of course, nutrition. You must seek whatever form of nutrition you need. You must seek, in our case, food, water, so on and so forth. You must then, in our case, then look for more complicated things that perhaps bacteria don't need to look for so much, which is shelter, warmth. And then, of course, you then must look for even more complicated things, such as emotional fulfillment. Because otherwise you go nuts over time. If you're not mentally stimulated throughout your life, you're going to go nuts from boredom. So there are other things that human beings go after that perhaps other animals or other organisms that are simpler than us simply don't go for. But applying our understanding of how we learn and integrate knowledge into ourselves and raise ourselves towards oneness at least within ourselves, and oneness amongst others, which is the same process that the universe is essentially going through. We have an understanding of that process, but applying it to the universe as a whole is very difficult. Applying it to the gods, they may go through an even more expansive process than us. Of course they will. Their minds are far greater than ours and they live for far longer. But the universe, that's as vast as it gets, or reality, that's as vast as it gets. And as I say, I don't say that it's got an intellect like we do, that it thinks, that it has its driving power, and that there's some kind of God behind the gods. And absolutely no way suggest that. But what I do say is there is still an intelligence to some degree, as I say, like a computer, that is able to process information, take it in, learn from it, and direct fate as a result. And it may direct that fate through other mediums, such as, or other means, such as, for example, the Norns. The Norns weave fate and direct it at the well of Earth. So, you know, there are aspects within our reality that actually may be sort of an extension of the universe also, or the reality as a whole, and that learning process of that reality as a whole. Okay, but as I say, all oneness is, and I've discussed this before, so I'm not going to go into great detail, is when an event is completed in reference to another event. These two events can be joined together through essentially observation. Okay, when an event is completed, there is an observer, ultimately another thing. Okay, another probability, and that it becomes an observer to this completed possibility. And these possibilities, when both fulfilled, observe one another. Okay, and there is a knowledge of what is going on. There is an understanding of what's going on, and that knowledge and understanding forms a glue, ultimately, which we simply give the word wisdom, but forms a glue that joins these things together and ultimately sends the knowledge and wisdom and these two elements back to the source, whatever that might be, but as I say, which we call oneness. Now, you can give another word to oneness. You can call it a singularity. Singularities exist within the material universe as we know it. Black holes are singularities. Black holes are not smaller than an atom. They're not very small at all, in fact. Most black holes are roughly the size of Manchester, a city in England, so they're the size of a sort of medium-sized city. So black holes are actually quite big, but they're still described as a singularity. Now, I see oneness as ultimately being almost like a singularity in its own respect. Not like a black hole where it's sucking in everything that's nearby because it's just this massive gravity well, essentially. It's not that. It's a well, maybe like the well of Earth, for example. Maybe that's where oneness is contained. But it's like a well, but it's a well for knowledge and fulfilled possibilities, the knowledge that comes from those possibilities. It's a well for ultimately completed fates to be to accumulate within. Now, this oneness, this reality, this singularity, as it grows, may not actually grow in size. It may just grow in density, or it may physically grow. It may become very expansive. By the end of the universe, it could be literally almost like the size that the universe was, or it might be tiny, like the well of Earth. It might be like a well of water almost. Okay, it doesn't really matter, because no matter how big or how small a singularity is, when you're within a singularity, certainly a singularity like oneness as we're describing, the thing is, it doesn't matter where you are in that singularity geometrically, so to speak. You could be physically over here or over here. You actually, essentially, even though you're in different areas, you're actually kind of in the same place at the same time. Time doesn't exist within a singularity, and so you lose a concept of space with that also. And so geometrically, there's no sort of separation, and this is why we call it a oneness. There's no separation between whatever constituents of the singularity are. There is no separation between those constituents. They are one, hence the term oneness. And so at the beginning of the universe, let's assume that Fehu, which is the desire to seek out and fulfill probabilities, it's the desire of fate to fulfill possibilities and probabilities. Say Fehu didn't exist, we just had a ruse onwards. Fate would go along and it would go into the singularity, it would go into the oneness that exists, and it would start fulfilling probabilities within that level of oneness. However, because in that oneness, which as I say are probabilities bound together with knowledge and understanding, i.e. wisdom, so probabilities bound by wisdom, as it goes, and that wisdom is generated through the attainment of probabilities and the understanding of how those probabilities were attained to their fullest level, okay, and the fullest level of knowledge of that understanding also, and an understanding of those processes as we get into. But fate would go in and it would complete a probability. However, that probability might as well, it doesn't matter if it's up here or down here, they're identical, because essentially there is no time, there is no distance, even though there is separation physically, there is no distance because of the nature of singularity or nature of oneness. That essentially, by completing one fate, it completes them all. And this is because if you imagine them all at the same point, they're all these aspects, these parts that make up oneness are together in a singular point, hence the term singularity. When you complete them, there's only one observer to that event, and that is what is being completed. There's no secondary observer like we get, like I described before, an event and another fulfilled event acting as an observer. There is no observer, and so other than the event being completed itself, and so there is no reference to the event being completed. There's no relativity or anything like this. There's no distinction. You cannot define the event because you've got nothing to compare it to, and as a result, when it goes in there, fate can complete an infinite number of possibilities, because of course at this point it would have an infinite number of amount of time, because time doesn't exist. It would go in there, and no matter how many probabilities and possibilities it can fulfilled, even if it completed all the infinite possibilities and probabilities that it could achieve, there would still be no growth in oneness within the universe, because you're just attaining things that are ultimately identical to one another at this point in time. As I say, the universe is an organic substance. It's an organic computer, okay? It takes in information, processes it, and forms oneness from that, but without perhaps with a sort of intelligent process behind it, but without, as I say, an AI or in form of intelligence, like an actual sort of awareness there. As I say, just is a sort of organic process that goes on. It's not like when we consider our bodies, our subconscious, for example, and what the subconscious controls, like our blood pressure, our heart rate, our breathing rate, the pupil dilatation, things like this. The body doesn't think or understand about all this data. It understands what's going on, in the sense that if there's too much light, it will cause a constriction of the pupils to let less light into the eye. It knows how to respond to certain stimuli and stuff like this, but it doesn't really, there's no awareness of what it's doing. It's just doing it almost like a reflex action. And that's how I see the universe. It has a reflective action on oneness, but its reflexes or its its whole purpose, as I say, as an organic computer, is just like all organic beings, is to strive to develop and grow. As I said, we as human beings have a multitude of needs, physical and emotional needs. We must keep our minds stimulated, and we must feed our bodies with food, and we must hydrate it with water, and we must do a whole lot of other things like keep warm, have shelter from the elements, so on and so forth, not get eaten by a wild animal, all these different things that we need to do. The universe has just one simple desire, and that is to grow. and it can to grow its oneness, to be specific, but it cannot grow that oneness, as I said, if it remains a singularity. And so the Fehu, the desire of fate, forces and is allowed to force the oneness to separate, the oneness at the bit, or the singularity at the beginning of any recreation or the end of any recreational cycle or macro cycle. It forces it to separate through a prism, essentially, of separation. And that oneness goes from one extreme to another. It goes from a singularity to an infinite sort of spectrum, ultimately, by going through this prism. You have an infinite amount of probabilities, an infinite number of possibilities, and time is a weird thing. And this is true as well, kind of, when you kind of have this infinite level. As you progress, time is not necessarily linear. Time goes in every single direction, essentially, around you. And so, as a result, you can progress to the future by going in this direction, as fate flows in this direction, but fate can also flow in this direction or this direction. In fact, it can go in any planar direction that it wants, and it can still go to the future. But it can also go to the past by going in that direction, and the present. And this is how divination works. Essentially, you just tap into one of those fates that goes in one of the directions that you want it to go in. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter. Whatever direction you go into, you can see the past, you can see the present, or you can see the future. It doesn't really matter. I don't want to talk about divination at the moment, but what I'm talking about is essentially what we have is now an infinite number of observers. Okay, so when you take a probability this time and we have fate interact with it, unlike before where there was a singularity where if it interacts with this fate, it doesn't really matter, it might as well interact with all of them at the same time, it's not going to gain any more oneness. When it interacts with this fate, there are an infinite number of observers. There's all the observers that are close, then there are those that are slightly further away, and then there are those that are infinitely far away. And each observer has a different perspective. First of all, they have a perspective as to whereabouts around them that they are, or the angle at which they are to the fate being fulfilled. We also have how they are at the angle of direction at which fate fulfilled that probability. Because remember, fate has direction given to it by Ansuz. Ansuz is intention, and intention gives direction. So fates are completed in an intelligent way. This is why I said the universe does have an intelligence behind it to some degree. Fate is completed in an intelligent manner, so that a fate or probability is fulfilled in the right time, and in the correct manner, and in the right direction, as I say, i.e. towards the future. So it's progressing towards the future. And this is why it's important to have direction and intention to fate. Without it, it would be a complete mess. But the angle at which you are to that direction also influences your perspective. You could be a future fate, or possibility, looking down upon this fate being completed, or you could be a past possibility that's already been fulfilled, observing this fulfillment of an action. Okay. The other thing is not just position, and position regards the actual possibility itself, and position regards the flow of fate, but what's also important is the distance you are from that fate. Okay. The closer you are, you get a much more detailed look at it, but you only see it from a certain side, so to speak. But the further away you are, you see all the consequences as well as the action itself that it may have. So if you're in the future, for example, or the past, it doesn't matter. You'll see how that impact of that thing being fulfilled will have between yourself and the probability. You will see the echoes, essentially, that it will have. And so the further you are, the less detail you see, but the more the bigger picture you will observe. Okay? And this is how the universe begins to understand itself. Because now that it's fragmented its oneness into infinite amount of probabilities and possibilities, and as it goes through fulfilling them with an infinite number of observers, it gets a full set of images essentially to work with. And this is how, once, for the power of KNAS, for example, a probability is fully fulfilled, not only is it fully fulfilled, but the universe has a full knowledge of what's going on, and by taking in every perspective that you can imagine, an infinite amount of perspective, and it has all the maximum amount of knowledge it can gain from that fulfillment. Now, the amount of knowledge or oneness it gets is limited by the action itself, but by having an infinite number of observers, you make sure that it's the only way to guarantee you have 100% knowledge, and then after that 100% understanding and 100% wisdom of what has gone on. And by having observers, i.e. having a relativity, that's what I've talked about before, when things fragment, you get relativity, you get comparative aspects to work with. You compare that action to something that's happened over here, and you can get a scale of what's going on also. It's like having two eyes gives you depth of field regards your vision. You can decide, you can work out very easily that this thing is closer, that this hand is closer than this hand. You can do that because you've got two eyes. If you have one eye, it's very hard to have depth perception, and essentially that's what you're doing by having multiple observers. Also, you're giving yourself a much more greater depth of perspective, and you combine these observers essentially together, or you then take this fulfilled action and integrate it with all the other fulfilled actions that have occurred through this knowledge and wisdom and this understanding that you've developed, back into source, back into whatever the source may be, which of course is oneness. It's this singularity that we previously described, and as I believe actually exists within the Wallaverde itself, within the tree of Yggdrasil. Okay, the Wallaverde is the source of all fate, so why wouldn't it be also the source, or somewhere around the Wallaverde be the source of oneness also? This is what I believe. Now, hopefully you understood that, but those of you who haven't, if you understood completely what I said there, then please go into the comment section and tell me what you think. Okay, this is my understanding as to why oneness fragments. It has to. It's a necessity. It's a necessity to fulfill the desire of Fehu, but it's also a necessity to fulfill the desire of reality, to gain oneness, because every time, as I say, reality goes through a new recreational process, a whole macro cycle, and is reborn again. When it goes through that rebirth process, that oneness, every time it goes through a new rebirth process, grows. Because what happens is when it fragments the probabilities of something which I didn't mention, so it's very important that I'd mention it now. When those probabilities fragment and create an infinite spectrum of probabilities that can be filled over a whole host of different time periods, a whole host of different moments, the moment of now, the moment of the past, moment of the future. Okay, when it does that, it leaves behind the knowledge and wisdom. That knowledge and wisdom is still contained. That's why I believe it must be in the Wallaverde, because that knowledge and wisdom is maintained, and that knowledge and wisdom is guiding fate. That knowledge and wisdom that it's gained from previous realities, from gaining oneness in previous realities, is Ansu's, the intention and the direction, the intelligent process of the universe telling fate where to go. So before I was trying to work out, well, is fate directed or not? Or is it something that just goes down the path of least resistance? 100% now convinced. Fate is 100% directed. It is directed down to fulfill certain fated possibilities and certain probabilities. The only thing is there are variables that fate can't take into consideration as such, as ourselves, even though there are possibilities for fates to be redirected. That's part of an intelligent process, right? To reassess the situation, not to have the plan and stick to it, but as things change, you go, okay, that was unexpected, this is the way fate's now going to go. that knowledge and wisdom is all there, and it's picking the best path that fate to take. So yes, you are fated to be born, yes, you are fated to die, and most of your life actions will be fated and life events will be fated, but it is still down to you, because there is a part of you as being a fulfilled event yourself. You are part of the creation process, and the beautiful thing about the universe and the beautiful thing about you is that creation leads to the universe creates through itself. It creates through creation, and you are a product of creation, and you create more by fulfilling possibilities, by fulfilling probabilities, by going out and having life experiences, by completing actions, by learning from those actions. You are actually going out and creating oneness and creating a level of understanding within the universe by going out there, not only increasing your own understanding, but also increasing the understanding of the universe as a whole. And that's the beautiful thing, as I say, the universe creating through its creations. And as I say, even though, yes, fate now seems much more directed, a little bit harder to get out of than previously thought, there are still possibilities where fate can be broken, because it's not destiny, it's not a hard woven fact that must be fulfilled. Now, I hope you can see and understand for yourselves the reasons why you need other observers, other probabilities, essentially, to exist, to give you the full perspective of what's going on, and to gain the absolute truth and understand knowledge, and thus the understanding of an action that's going on. But if you don't, I can simplify it in much more sort of modern day terms. Okay. One thing that happens is when there is a criminal activity of some form, like a bank robbery, something very public, the police will always take on, obviously, witness reports. Witness reports are very important because they are essentially the eyes and ears of the world. They are probabilities, essentially, if we're considering fate and the fulfillment of probabilities. They are the independent observers, the other probabilities which have either been fulfilled or haven't been fulfilled, doesn't matter, within time and all the rest of it, but they are the observers of what's gone on, and when you collect the information from all of them, you get the complete picture. And the reason for this is, as I say, perception changes according to where you are in relation to the event that occurred, how close you are to it, how close you are to the interaction of fate, which wouldn't come into this example, but also then, you know, getting the bigger picture also as well. Now, it also helps you to sort of rub out any sort of observer error. Not saying that the universe would make mistakes, but obviously sometimes things can be observed and things can be seen as the truth, but they're not the truth. They're not what's actually going on. And I'll explain it for this example, a bank robbery. Okay, so something quite elaborate and quite fun to work with. Okay, if a bank robbery occurred, and let's say there's 4 or 5 observers, let's work it out as we go along. There's 4 men who rob a bank. They come in a car. Okay, this is the full picture, okay, that I'm giving you now, not what the observers have seen. They come around the car from this side. Okay, they come to a stop. They get out of the car. They come to the cashier, pull out guns on the cashier, threaten her, get the money, run back to the car, and then drive off in this direction. The true fact is that they are wearing black leather jackets and blue denim jeans. Okay, their faces obscured with bunny masks, let's say, which have been sewn into sort of like balaclavas or something. Okay, to fully hide the face. These are all the facts that we need to know, and the colour of the car is red. Okay, now the reason why this is important, because in witness statements, if we're assuming everyone who's giving a statement is giving 100% the truth. They're not hiding anything because they've got nothing to hide, and they want to help the police, so they give 100% of the truth. They're giving all the facts that they saw and observed and truly believe to be true. However, they can give false facts, and it's not because they're lying, and it's not because they're trying to hide anything. It's because of their perception. It's their perspective for where they are. They might not get the full picture, and secondly, on top of that, they fill in the blanks as a result. What they don't see, they simply fill in the blanks. That's the nature of the human mind. Now, I don't believe this is the nature of the universe, but it shows you the importance of obviously having different observers, and it also shows you how being further away gives you the bigger picture to a much greater degree than perhaps being up close, especially when adrenaline is having, playing mind tricks on you. Because when you're in a scary situation, you don't process information correctly, and it could be that when events are occurring against these kind of probabilities that are close by, that there is some interaction between them that could distort the perception to some degree. But I don't think that's the case. I just think the ones that are close by can only see it from this angle, whereas the ones over here can they get a fuller picture, as I say, of what's going on. And when you combine it with all the possibilities everywhere, as I say, you get the complete picture, and that is how complete amount of knowledge, a complete understanding, and a complete wisdom is gained. And that is how oneness, and the maximum amount of oneness, is gained through every reality, and how it organically grows and how it adds. That's why knowledge is always gained every time, because there's an intelligent process driving fate down possibilities and probabilities that have not yet been attained. And the maximum amount of, you don't want to have to repeat yourself, okay? You don't want a half-assed job if you're the universe and have to live the same reality again and again and again until you've got the full picture. You want to be able to get it in one take, okay? And the only way to do that is to have an infinite number of observers, as I've previously stated. So let's go back to the bank robbery. The first witness is the cashier who is robbed. Okay, no, the first observer is a man on the corner of the road over this side. He gives the statement. Let's just go over it. They're wearing black leather jackets, denim bottoms, and they have bunny masks sewn into a black balaclava, and they are driving a red car. They're the facts we're working with. I don't know if that's different from before, but they're definitely the 100% facts that we're working with. Okay, the man on this side, okay, says, yes, I saw a car driving at pace, at a lot of speed, come screeching around the corner and come to a full stop. I saw 4 men get out of the car. They were wearing head-to-toe black and balaclavas over their face. Okay, they went into the bank, and when they came out, they had obviously bags of money on them. They got into the car, which I believe, to be honest, I'm not sure what colour it was. I think it was brown, already brown maybe, but brown I would say, and they drove off in that direction. Okay, now that observer, one, hasn't seen anything that's gone in the bank, but also because he wasn't fully concentrating because of the shock again, because he's quite close to obviously seeing a screeching car go past him. That would have scared him. He hasn't taken in all the information. He's got a lot of it. Okay, he said they were all in black, which is almost correct. They have black jackets, black leather jackets, but they are wearing denim jeans, and he said they had black masks over their face, balaclavas. He may not have been able to observe the bunny faces that have been sewn into them, or maybe he did, but maybe he was just too far to see it in detail. He then said that they went in this direction, which is correct, but he was uncertain on the car colour. He was close, but he wasn't fully there. The cashier says she heard what sounded like a speeding car coming to a stop outside. Didn't really pay much attention to it. However, the next thing she knew, there were 4 men who had come into the bank, pulled firearms on her, told her to give her the money. She gave her the money, and then they ran out. She didn't see which direction they drove off into. because she was hiding in fear and in shock behind the counter. Okay. Regards the clothes that they were wearing, she said they were wearing bunny masks and balaclavas, black leather jackets, but she didn't really. She thinks they were wearing blue bottoms, but then not sure. Probably denim jeans, but she wasn't sure because, of course, as the cashiers they approached, initially she didn't really pay too much attention until obviously it was too late and she realised what was going on. And of course, the cashier desk was obscuring her view to some degree of their bottom half. She didn't know which direction they drove in, so she didn't know that, but she got a very good description of the mask, the face, the clothes they were wearing, and the fact they were 4 men. Then there is one more observer, one that's over here, sort of towards where they're driving off to, but who's got a view into the bank, so you can see what's going on in the bank. But has a much more in-depth perspective of what's going on. Okay, he said he saw a car driving around this corner, from where it came from. He saw it come to a stop. He saw what initially he thought were 3 men coming out because he couldn't see the one who got out of the back door, passenger door on the side of the car where he wasn't on, and he said that they were wearing black, but that's all he could say. They were wearing black on the tops and black masks of some form. They went in, pulled guns on the cashier, came out running with the money. He then saw, because now they're facing him, that not only were they wearing black, but they had white bunny masks on. He also could tell that they were wearing jeans, and that there was actually now 4 men, because the perspective has changed slightly. Instead of going away from him, they're now going towards him. So that's direction, and that's why direction's important. Because they were coming towards him, he gained additional information. Okay. He saw 4 men now because he had a bit more time to take in everything, and he probably was still walking, so he was looking at a slightly different angle. And he saw 4 men with bunny masks, then getting into the car and speeding down here. And he said that the car was red. Why was he the only one who got the car colour 100% correct? Okay, this guy was fairly correct, but not. He said brown, not red. Okay, but he wasn't sure if it was browny red, but he said brown in the end. The woman in the cashier had no idea about the car, couldn't even give you the type of car it was or anything, not alone the colour. Okay, this guy, why? Because he's further away. In this case, he's not as afraid. He's not in any danger, not like this guy who nearly got run over, not like this woman who had guns pulled on her. He, perfectly safe. Because they went off in this direction and kind of went round the corner. He's actually added additional information no one else had added. He said that they went down, then after going down here, they went down here and then up here. Okay, because he could see the full street down there. But he wasn't affected by adrenaline. He wasn't afraid, and so he was able to process the information much better than everyone else also. Also, the distance that he was at allowed him, and the position that he was in, not only allowed him to see the full picture, but also to see the direction of movement of the individuals, gave him additional information when the direction changed. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you can understand that, how witness reports can be different, but everyone's telling the truth. They might give you false facts, but you can see how they corroborate. Everyone basically said, well, 2 out of the 3 people said, yeah, they drove in that direction. The other person said they didn't know what was going on. They all corroborated that there was 4, although originally this guy said, well, he thought there were 3, but then he realised there was 4 on the way out. Okay, so everyone said there were 4 guys. They all kind of got that they were wearing black. Not everyone got the denim. Not everyone got the bunny masks. But there was enough corroboration to then put it all together to get the full picture. Okay? And this, imagine if you had an infinite number of witnesses fully surrounding the building, they'd give you the full story. Not only what happened here, but the lead up to it, and then the consequences, the echoes that go go into the future, and the echoes that were essentially created in the past, the build up to it, and then say the echoes that happen after it, and what happens afterwards when essentially the robbery has occurred. They can tell you more about their getaway. And this is essentially why it's important to have an infinite number of observers for any fulfillment of a possibility through fate. An infinite number of observers, an infinite number of angles, infinite number of interactions with the event, and you as a result have that 100% knowledge of exactly what's gone on. There's no room for interpretation, there's no assumptions anymore once you corroborate the information and process it correctly, and that's as a result you then gain a full understanding once you've processed that information and worked out what's the truth, and then from that you gain wisdom. That's how the universe works. That's how it develops oneness, and we've discussed why it separates the oneness, because if it didn't separate the oneness, the desire of the universe to grow being an organic element in itself, and if you doubt that the universe is organic, we're all organic. Everything in the world is created from the universe. You could say has, you know, in paganism we believe everything has life within it. Even the inanimate objects has been created, so it's got creative force within it, i.e. life within it. Okay, and so everything is of life. So the universe must be of life also. It can't be anything different because it's birthed us all. We are the birth products of the universe or reality. And so it must be like ourselves, organic in nature. And so it must have the same things that everything that is living and has an intelligence of some form. Okay, it must strive to grow and develop. And this is why it allows a separation and oneness through the power of Faith. It's faith that separates the oneness, but it's the universe that allows it to occur. Perhaps it's the universe that created fate, or realities that create fate, to allow this process to occur. That is another question for another time. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it.